Part 37. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 361. Greet looked up blankly. The dwarf is not tall, with a broad and thick chest, and that chest is particularly suitable for resonance. A dwarf yelling was like thunder, and a group of dwarves let out a loud shout, "Hey guys, there were 10 subwoofers installed in a small screening room with 20 people, and they all fired at the same time. And they're still in the cave, the echo effect, super doubled. It's so noisy, but keep smiling." At this moment, Gretel saw the young dwarf sitting opposite him across the long table. He blinked at him and showed a smile that said, "I can't help it, I'm helpless too." Gretel. Phew. He speaks softly, has no qualifications to speak, and has to accompany and listen to this kind of meeting. It is the most painful. The meeting on the morning of the first day, described in modern diplomatic terms, can be said to be a frank and in-depth exchange of views between the two sides. Greet listened patiently to Noon, and finally heard something interesting. Simply put, the Dwarf Kingdom is a resource-based country, and it is a resource-based country that cannot be self-sufficient in food. It relies on exports in exchange for food. This kind of economic structure is inherently dangerous, but unfortunately, the type of their exports is still very single. Ore, refined ore, and semi-finished products. Copper ingots, iron ingots, mithril ingots, fine gold ingots, and various metal ingots. Weapons, armor. That's it for commodities. Others are all minor items, accounting for too low a share to be worth mentioning. The prices of metals such as copper and iron are low, freight is high, and profits are slim. Exporting metal ingots is somewhat meaningful, but exporting ore basically has no one to pull it. Adamant gold is too hard, has extremely poor magic guiding properties, and is difficult to smelt. It is mainly used to make knight equipment. Those knight masters are not as happy to spend money as magicians. Only mithril was originally the most important export item. As a result, from last year to now, the Magic Council's import volume of mithril has dropped by half, while the import volume of mithril ore has increased 20 times. In this way, the Dwarf Kingdom calculated its income for the past year and found that it still lost money. We imported 50,000 less barrels of ale last year. 1 year. 50,000 less. Do you know what 50,000 barrels is? That is to say, the miners worked hard for a year, and their output increased 20-fold. Looking back, they drank 1 less barrel of ale every month. You magicians are as cunning as foxes in the snow. You keep treating us as friends and brothers, but secretly, you are trying your best to squeeze out our blood and sweat. Gretel, cough. Capital comes to the world. Thank God, this torture of hearing finally came to an end at noon. Everyone walked towards the restaurant, and the young dwarf immediately came to Greet's side and tried his best to stand on tiptoes. "Are you Master Nordmark?" "My name is Gavin, and Master Talbot is my grandfather. Thank you for taking care of my grandfather along the way. Are you free this afternoon? I will take you to visit the royal city. I have to ask the Archmage first. You know, I'm just a low-level mage, so I may not be able to wander around." Archmage Serrano got what he wanted and kicked Gretel out. Anyway, there is an internal meeting of the trade group in the afternoon, mainly with several archmages expressing their opinions. Gretel can go out for a walk, and he can also build a good relationship with the dwarves. Although the dwarves are not tall, the royal city is quite grand, with a huge piece of the mountain hollowed out. Gavin took Gretel straight to the center of the royal city. After walking for a while, a heat wave hit his face. Greet reflexively added cold and heat resistance to herself. Gavin laughed, "It's hot, isn't it? In front of you is the melting pot, which was the lava brought from the ground by Mage King Raymond and the 7 sages 600 years ago. The best weapons in the royal city are all produced here. The most difficult ore to smelt can only be refined with lava from a large furnace. That's not necessarily the case. Isn't the oxygen-blown converter fragrant? Gretel complains silently. It's a pity that he is not a professional in smelting. He had only managed to build an oxygen pipeline with the support of the Magic Council before. Now let him rub it with his own hands. Forget it. The melting pot is indeed terrible. From afar, Gretel saw a high dome. Under the dome, a huge blast furnace stood majestically, with waves of heat billowing. Looking from a distance, countless black shadows are standing on the edge of the red magma, busy and making endless clanging sounds. For such a big melting pot, the width of the roads around it is naturally amazing. Greet's visual inspection revealed that it was at least 6 lanes wide in both directions, and some bright lines were drawn on the ground so that people would not collide when walking. There were dwarves constantly running around pushing carts and wheelbarrows, unloading carts of goods to the edge of the magma pool, and pushing new goods away. Greet was still 20 meters away from the magma pool and refused to get any closer. Resistant to cold and heat, it can still withstand it? In fact, the effective range of this magic is said to be from -45 degrees below zero to 60 degrees above zero, and it can still remain comfortable. However, you can't stay comfortable but you can't stay safe. What if something happens to the furnace? The last time he went to visit the mithril smelting, he saw that the lava was gurgling and could explode at any time. Gavin didn't force him and took him around in a circle, along the circular passage. Pointing as you go. This is the Red Iron Hall, where ordinary miners live. This is the Hammer Forging Hall, where the forgers live. The tools we use every day and the mass-produced weapons are all made here. This is the Steel Blade Hall, a military camp and a training area for warriors. Most people are on patrol now. You can come over and take a look in the evening. There are a large number of knights coming back from patrol. It's still very nice to see. This is a trading area, and foreign caravans all live here. There are a lot of people coming here these days, and there are a lot of goods. Come, I will take you for a walk. He raised his legs and walked inside. Gretel followed behind with Bernard. After walking a few steps, he heard shouts one after another. Whale meat. Whale meat is sold cheaply. 1 pound is only a copper. It's so fat and tender that the whole family can eat it for a day. How poor is this, dragging all the whale meat back? When whales are hunted, don't they only take the whale oil and whale brains, and throw away all the whale meat? Durban venison. Walrus jerky. Seal jerky. Dried cod. Authentic products at a reasonable price, large quantities will give you a discount. Gretel quickly added a bubble spell to himself. Is this dried meat pickled or sun-dried? The smell is too smoky. Don't let it get moldy, right? Ale. The best thunder ale. Refreshing and pleasant, with bubbles dancing in every sip. Are you sure it's beer and not carbonated drinks? Hey, it seems there is no Coca-Cola in this world. Machete. Warhammer. Sword. The best weapons are all available in Jean's blacksmith shop for you to choose from. Humans, dwarves, barbarians, all kinds of cries were heard. Greet walked forward despite the noise, and after passing half of the shops, he suddenly heard someone shouting in the distance. Listen to the gospel of God. Listen to the teachings of the Lord of Glory. Have Holy Communion. The Mid-Autumn Festival has begun. I wish everyone a happy Mid-Autumn Festival in advance. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Red Comet Mars for the reward of 20,000 starting coins. Today and tomorrow, both are 6,000 words. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 362. Chapter 362. It's a dead person, call the priest. Listen to sermons and take communion? Gretel paused and couldn't help but turn in the direction where the shouting came from. Bernard shouted from behind. Boss! Boss, what's wrong with you? What's so good about the Lord of Glory? You also killed several of them, you forgot. Are you short of food or something? When we usually eat together, I can cut 2 pieces of meat from my lamb leg, which is enough for you. Hey, I'll just take a look. From a distance Gretel waved his hand casually. Don't ask, just ask because the other party's marketing techniques are too familiar and he wants to take a look. By the way, let's wait and see if the other party's marketing words are Joseph, sit down and let's talk about what's on your mind. Oh no, it's the other party's so-called Holy Communion, which is bread and wine. Greet, curious, and already known, Nordmark did what he said, and stopped about 10 meters away from the preaching crowd. From this distance, the preacher's words could be heard clearly. In ancient times, floods, droughts, and snowstorms occurred frequently, plagues were prevalent, and monsters roamed the wilderness. The Lord of Radiance took pity on his people and said to them, "Boring. This story doesn't sound good. When you go to the Dwarflands to promote the Lord of Radiance, at least you can tell a good story." Greet, who had been bombarded by novels, movies, and animations in her previous life, shook her head and decided to give the other party 1 more minute of patience and leave without seeing the Holy Communion. However, before the Holy Communion appeared, a roar shook the entire place. "You're talking nonsense." Then there was a burst of people falling on their backs. When Greet came back to his senses, a big man had already rushed to the podium, grabbed the preacher, hit him with his fist, and cursed. "Charity, your charity. Rena, your benevolence. I killed my whole family for you since I was a child. Capture me as a slave. You don't know how many whips I received. Add hashtag UN% asterisk backslash U0026 amp. What followed was a series of intensive roars, so friendly that language master didn't even translate them. Pity the preacher in black robe and white scarf. He was knocked down with the first punch. Blood splattered with the second punch. After the third and fourth punches, the effect. Greet's mind was spinning, and there was only one famous textbook scene. Lutiha beats Guangzai with punches. Naturally, other members of the glorious Holy See cannot stand idly by. The 2 knights had just brought over several baskets of Holy Communion. Upon seeing this, they immediately put the baskets down and rushed forward with roars. The big man threw away the preachers, turned around and fought with them, punching and kicking them, the wind howling. If this were the case in the previous life, the crowd that came to hear sermons, to receive Holy Communion, would scream, run, and even half of them would escape on the spot. But the dwarves deserved their martial virtues, not to mention the barbarians. Instead of running away, they tightened their stance and formed a tight circle. Eat melon with relish and happily. That's a good punch. He's a man. Hey, who is that? If you fight, just fight, don't use the knife. Fortunately, there were half barbarians in the crowd, so Gretel's view of the show was not blocked. He subconsciously leaned closer to Bernard and looked around. A fight is about to begin, no one cares. Who cares about personal feuds? Gavin shrugged beside him. No matter how much the short shoulders are shrugged, they can't reach Greet's elbows. The ones who beat people are barbarians, and those who are beaten are the Holy See of Glory, not envoys. Just wait, when they are almost done fighting, the patrol will come out and put an end to it. He pointed to the place from a distance. Gretel looked back and saw a group of dwarf knights, wearing shiny armor and riding strong goats, watching quietly dozens of meters away. Gretel relaxed and continued to watch the fight. Orc. He didn't even have time to see clearly just now. Looking at the 2 Holy See Knights again, the one in the middle shouting for a fierce battle was indeed an orc. She has long, flowing hair that is 3/4 black and 3/4 white, her ears are erect, and her nose is raised. She is obviously different from humans. Greet was observing the details when he saw that the orc had been punched hard on the cheek, and blood started to flow from the corner of his mouth. It won't be easy to heal if it gets damaged. Greet murmured. He didn't know the slightest bit about the anatomy of an orc. Even if he knew, he was not a maxillofacial surgeon and would not dare to perform surgery on others at will. The orcs were 1 against 2, and they didn't seem to suffer. While rolling and fighting, a big furry tail suddenly stood up and slapped the knight's legs and feet. If it was hit, there would be a bloody mark and swelling on the spot. Tisk, 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 tisk. Greet sighed. This skill is so good, it seems that if the Holy See side wants to win, it needs a few more people. Just as he was thinking about it, a cloud of black mist suddenly exploded without warning. The 2 glorious knights, an orc and the preacher who was knocked to the ground and didn't know if he was still alive, were all shrouded in black mist, followed by several screams. Ah! Ah! Gretel was shocked. He took a step reflexively and stopped immediately. Bernard rushed forward and pulled the boss back, his tall body completely covering the front. The sound of hooves was like thunder, and the dwarf knights rushed to pat the sheep. The short and squat body gathered around and immediately shouted, "Pastor! Pastor! Call the priest!" Gretel poked his head out from behind Bernard. The black fog in front has dispersed. Onlookers formed a circle around the boss and screamed one after another. Died. They're all dead. So much blood. You're not dead, are you? You're still calling the priest. Gretel poked Bernard and pushed him forward. After several pokes, Bernard slowed down and led him forward. When they finally managed to get through a group of barbarians, they saw blood all over the ground, and even half of the people who had been fighting were left standing. The preacher who was beaten first had a paint chop on his face and was unconscious. Gretel didn't even need to check carefully, but 7 or 8 possibilities including concussion and intracranial hemorrhage popped up in his mind. 2 knights lay on their backs, one covering his throat with both hands, hissing between his fingers, and blood bursting out. Listening to the sound, it seemed that his trachea was torn. The other one fell to the ground with his hands and feet stretched out, a scar on his neck, and blood spurting everywhere. Greet only took one look at the amount of bleeding and the traces of spray, and immediately came to a conclusion. The carotid artery was ruptured and there was no way to save it. Looking at the orc again, there was a sharp blade stuck in his chest, up to the hilt. His consciousness was still clear, but he could no longer struggle. It was obvious that his injuries were serious enough and his life was hanging by a thread. Greet wanted to take a closer look, but was suddenly pulled back and pushed behind Bernard. The next moment, hurried footsteps rushed over and stopped directly beside the knight. There were 2 thumps, thumps, followed by high-pitched prayers. Oh, someone has taken care of those glorious knights. Gretel turned his head indifferently. He calmly took a step back and watched the dwarf knights swarm forward, separating the people on both sides. I saw 2 dwarf knights jumping off the goat and trying to take the orc away, but they were stopped by the shining knight, and the 2 sides confronted each other angrily. Seeing a dozen orcs arriving, the 2 sides almost started fighting. Finally, each took a step back and left the scene with the injured. Watching another dwarf knight urging the goat, shouting "Priest, priest," and flew away. Gretel quietly followed the orcs team. As soon as he turned the corner, he saw these guys rushing towards the house, and he quickly shouted, "I'm a priest." Great. Come on, the 2 orcs immediately turned aside to make way. Gretel quickly walked through the door, walked to the injured orc warrior, and stretched out his hand to feel his breath. Just as he knelt down, 2 heavy and rapid footsteps rushed over, shaking the ground. "How is my brother? Master, please save my brother dash." Coming, coming." Huh, huh, slow down. I fell asleep at 1:30 last night. I couldn't hold it any longer. 10,000 rewards plus more updates tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 363. The priest who was pulled over wheezing, Gretel didn't see anyone. He first saw 5 stick-like fingers, withered and thin, probing the nostrils of the injured just like Gretel. Then pull back and feel the injured person's pulse. Gretel raised his head despite his busy schedule. Oops. What race is this orc, from? A dog is not like a dog, and a cat is not like a cat. If it is a minotaur, the horns on his head look a bit like it, then it is too short and too thin. He was still hunchbacked, his whole body was shivering and huddled up, his face was sad. If this is related to the word ox, it can only be called a snail. No matter whether it is a snail or a beetle, it is a good cow if it can heal the wounded. But it's a pity that the old orc who was half kneeling opposite had an extremely ugly face. He stretched his trembling hand toward the injured man's chest and tried to pull out the dagger several times, but he didn't dare to pull it out. The level of my healing skills is too low. Let's maintain it temporarily until the high-level healers come. He lowered his head and murmured. Even with language proficiency, Gretel couldn't understand what he was singing, just like knowing Chinese wouldn't necessarily be able to identify the lyrics. Only waves of light red light could be seen falling on the injured person. After a while, the old priest was panting and sweating on his forehead. "Hey, you can help too. Aren't you a priest?" shouted a young orc next to him. Gretel raised his head and glanced around, then deliberately dropped a tool to treat minor injuries, lowered his head, and continued to observe the injured. In this room of orcs, some are like dogs, some are like cats, and some are like foxes. Their complexions are dark and light, yellowish and white, their physical features are quite different from those of humans. Now let him compare them to determine whether the patient's complexion is pale. The reference objects are too complicated to judge, so I say goodbye. Greet used more than 10 years of clinical emergency experience to quickly judge the condition of the injured. The wounded man's eyes were wide open, and his gaze followed them, but he was still conscious. There was a wound on his chest, about 2 centimeters long, with an unknown depth, and he did not dare to draw the knife for the time being. The location of the knife was just to the left of the center of the chest, in the 5th intercostal space. How many pairs of ribs does an orc have? Does this position hurt your heart? Did you poke your lungs? Gretel quickly took out the endless ink pen and stuffed it into the orc. Inhale, concentrate, and release detection magic. Nothing can be seen. This is embarrassing. Endless ink pen is a level 9 magic equipment that can observe objects 5 levels lower than it. This warrior is obviously of a higher level and has too much life energy. The magical aura of the endless ink pen cannot penetrate the body of the injured. The old priest was still chanting hard and hanging on to the injured person's vital signs. Gretel seized the moment and put his hand on the injured man's forehead, sweating. There are blood vessels bulging high on the neck. Depending on the location, it's probably, maybe the jugular vein? Pulse, I don't know what the normal pulse of an orc is, but the feeling under the fingertips is shallow and fast, and it is getting faster and faster. The feeling of pressing the fingertips is the same as the feeling of weakness caused by hemorrhagic shock and sudden drop in blood pressure in the injured person in the previous life. No difference. Pull out the copper tube stethoscope and listen. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of the heartbeat was weak, heavy, and vague, as if coming from a very far away place. Precordile stab wound, not much bleeding, distended jugular veins, sudden drop in blood pressure, low and distant heart sounds, So many symptoms, all the same, all pointing to critical illness, acute cardiac tamponade. There is a layer of muscle outside the human heart called the pericardium. The pericardium is extremely dense and surrounds the heart, with pericardial fluid inside for lubrication. For example, now, the injured person's heart was stabbed with a knife, and he was obviously bleeding, but the pericardial muscles contracted on their own, trapping the blood in the pericardium and preventing it from flowing into the chest cavity. With this layer of protection, the amount of heart bleeding will not be too large, and hemorrhagic shock will not quickly occur. However, if there is too much bleeding, too much blood will accumulate in the pericardial cavity, and the pressure will increase, which will compress the heart from the outside. When the pressure reaches a certain level and exceeds the force of myocardial pulsation, the heart will be unable to beat, causing cardiac arrest. Without the beating of the heart, arterial blood cannot be transported to the whole body, and the patient will soon fall into a state of hypoxia. Within 3 to 4 minutes at most, brain tissue deprived of oxygen will suffer irreversible damage. At that point, it's useless to save him. Greet jumped up immediately. Who can call the shots? Who can call the shots here? Me, 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 3 or 5 orcs shouted together. There were soldiers who rushed to the scene first, a brown-haired orc who dragged an old priest and shouted "Save my brother," and even a catwoman with a graceful figure. While shouting, "You pushed me and I pushed you," as if rushing to answer. Gretel had seen this situation many times in the emergency department in his previous life. There are 7 sisters-in-law and 8 aunts crowding the consulting room. After one person has asked the question, the other one has to ask it again. There are people who are busy digging into their pockets to collect money. There are also people who squeeze forward desperately when questioning the doctor, and when they are looking for someone to sign and pay, they gather together. Shrinking back. There are all kinds of them, and if you spend a week in the emergency department, you can definitely get them all. The matter is urgent and I don't want to bother with them. Gretel glanced left and right, and immediately stared at the blonde orc who had the most gold jewelry on his body and the strongest chest, standing in the C position of the crowd, and said in a quick voice. He is dying. I may be able to save him, but only if I open his chest and touch his heart. If you allow it, I will treat it. If you don't allow it, I have no other choice but to leave. The solution to cardiac tamponade is not difficult, or so it seems to modern surgeons. Open the chest and make a pericardiotomy to allow blood to flow out of the pericardium. The pressure in the pericardium is relieved and the heart naturally resumes beating. As long as all this is completed before being deprived of oxygen for 4 minutes, the person will be saved. However, this treatment method is undoubtedly a crooked approach at present. Gretel would never dare to do it unless he made it clear to his family, or if he didn't make it clear to the person who could make the decision at the scene and get their consent. Just kidding, there were about a dozen orcs present. He and Bernard, even with the dwarf Gavin, there were only 3 people in total. He rashly went up to someone to cut his chest open, but he was not worthy of a beating. What? Caesarectomy. There was a bang in the room. Before the blonde orc could answer, several warriors started shouting loudly. Are you the devil? No, you are a necromancer. He's injured so badly. If you do another thoracic surgery, he'll definitely die. Simon, Simon. The Catwoman threw herself on the injured man, her face pressed against his chest, mourning deeply. Just after crying twice, a copper pipe suddenly poked down, grazed her cheek and landed on the injured man's chest. The Catwoman was startled, and her claws popped out on the spot. There was a clang, and 3 claw marks appeared on the outer wall of the stethoscope. Greed took back the stethoscope expressionlessly and looked up at the blonde orc. You'd better decide quickly. His heartbeat is getting weaker and he won't last much longer. How long can you keep him alive? The blonde orc suddenly spoke. But he was not asking Gretel, but the old orc on the ground. The old orc raised his head tremblingly, sweating like rain. No, it won't be long, I'm just a mid-level priest. I can't cure this kind of fatal injury. Simon saved my life, the blonde orc suddenly said. He took off a gold bracelet studded with gems and handed it to Gretel. If you can save him alive, I will give you whatever you want. But if you kill him dash. Gretel stood up and walked out. What a joke, the injured person saved your life, but he didn't save my life. Thoracotomy is such a dangerous operation, and the family members still want me to treat it with such an attitude. I'm not stupid. There was no registration, no ambulance was sent to the hospital, and it was stipulated that the doctor could not refuse treatment, so he died. Two orc warriors blocked the door reflexively. Gretel paused and said with a straight face. What? Did I kill the person? Get out of the way. The two soldiers stood frozen and refused to move. Gretel snorted and turned his body half sideways. Bernard was ready to step forward. At this moment, a sharp cry sounded from deep in the room. His heart stopped beating. Heartbeat stopped? So fast. Greed turned around suddenly. The old orc trembled, suddenly pulled out the dagger from the wounded man's chest, and slashed his own chest with his backhand. One stab, two stabs, three stabs, blood flowed like a drop, and then, an illusory rain of blood sprayed directly from his chest onto the injured body. Gretel quickly threw a fortune-telling spell. The wounded man's aura became slightly stronger, but soon became weaker again. Amid the desperate pleas of the Catwoman and the roars of the warriors, the old orc collapsed to the ground and shook his head helplessly. You cure it? I don't blame you if I can't cure it. The blonde orc finally shouted. Greed stepped back to the wounded man, leaned over and took a look, instructing everyone to carry him to the table, and reached for the dagger. Boss, you can't cut it? Bernard reminded calmly from behind. Gretel was silent, taking a deep breath, and another deep breath, then, he patted the space bag, and the silver skeleton given by Archmage Edgar flew out of it, and assembled itself piece by piece. There was a sudden silence in the room. Behind Gretel, an unknown orc whispered. He is indeed a necromancer. Greed had no time to deal with that guy. He quickly poured iodine on the patient's chest, wiped it, poured alcohol, and wiped it again. The silver skeleton stepped forward, Gretel handed it a dagger, and threw a demonized weapon on the dagger. Then, he took a step back very skillfully, walking around from the direction of the surgeon to stand opposite the assistant. This time, I finally no longer have to stand in the position of equipment nurse, which is gratifying. The silver skeleton held the dagger and slashed it. Time was urgent, and there was no time to do any delicate work. This knife cut open the chest directly, and 4 enhanced mage hands came out at once, 2 on each side, pulling the sternum and breaking it apart. Amidst the heart-wrenching creaking sound, a huge, red heart, as big as 2 fists, quickly appeared in front of everyone. The orc warriors gathered around to watch. The silver skeleton's hand raised and lowered the knife, and then another knife slashed across the surface of the heart. Gretel shouted, "Stay away." No one paid attention. One by one, they moved forward desperately, just to see more clearly. However, when the knife fell, the pericardium was opened, and a column of dark red blood instantly rushed up and sprayed straight onto the roof. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. In the new week, the number of recommended votes has dropped to more than 1,000. Thanks to @Kutanshari for the 3,000 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 364. Chapter 364 Kill That Undead Spirit, The Miracle Doctor. Red Comet Mass 1 Reward 1 More Update. The screams were terrible. 4 of the 6 orcs who came around screamed on the spot, leaned back, and fell to the ground. The Catwoman closed her eyes tightly and passed out without saying a word. Only the leading blonde orc was braver and did not faint or fall. His only reaction was to stand blankly under the rain of blood, with his mouth open, not moving even as the rain of blood splashed into his mouth. No one can walk around the world without getting stabbed. Everyone in this group of orcs has been on the battlefield, but to be honest, beheading people, cutting off their arms, or even biting their throats and taking out their windpipes on the battlefield is really not that scary. Didn't you see that in the black mist just now? The Knight of the Glorious Holy See had his throat cut with a knife, and blood flowed all over the ground, so the onlookers just wanted to scream twice. But, this is different. This is saving people. The priest who was using healing skills just now released a skeleton and cut open the chest with one knife, the sternum with another knife, and the heart with another knife. The blood spurts on. If the house hadn't been used to host orcs and barbarians, the floor height would have been so high that it could have sprayed onto the rafters. The orcs dispersed subconsciously. The 4 who fell to the ground didn't even bother to get up. They held their hands on the ground and squirmed back. There was a kid behind him who was so frightened that he even ran out of the room. Help dash. Gretel was in no mood to pay attention to them. If the blood comes to the room, it goes to the room. The carotid artery is ruptured, the aorta is ruptured, and the heart is opened. In the hospital, surgeries are done every year, but the blood does not go to the room a few times a year. Sprayed onto the shadowless lamp, it sizzled with the heat, and the entire field of surgery was dyed red. I don't have to continue the surgery. He stepped back half a step with experience to avoid the rain of blood, and immediately rushed forward. He looked down and saw that his heart had not resumed beating. He made a quick decision and reached into the chest of the injured person. I rubbed my right hand with iodine and alcohol long ago, held the heart directly outside the pericardium, and squeezed it hard. Once, twice, 3 times. Letting go of his hand, the heart that had stopped working before started beating on its own again. Greet stared closely at the heart. Although cardiopulmonary resuscitation under direct vision is a required skill in clinical surgery and included in the syllabus for the medical practitioner examination, he had only practiced it twice as an emergency doctor for more than 10 years in his previous life. Without him, this operation would test your courage. Thinking back on it now, I remember the feeling of my heart being held in my hand, as if it was still beating against my palm. The orc's heart in front of him was much stronger than the ones he had squeezed in his previous life, and it beat very powerfully. Very good. If the heartbeat of the heart is weak, he will have to search for epinephrine or sodium lactate to inject into the ventricle. There is really no place to look for it at the moment. But now, he only needs to find the damage to the heart, repair it, and close the chest step by step. Greet breathed a sigh of relief. He turned his head to look at the wounded man's face. It was difficult to tell whether his face had improved. After all, he was not familiar with the orc's complexion, but his breathing had recovered. Then he raised his eyelids with the hand of the mage and saw that his pupils began to shrink, obviously heading in a good direction. Okay, next, you can repair the heart. Greet took out the shadowless lamp from the space bag and held it up with the enhanced version of the mage's hand. The dazzling white light instantly illuminated the operating table, and also illuminated the beating heart of the injured in front of everyone's eyes, showing every detail. Comfortable. This is the light that surgery should have. Greet adjusted the shadowless lamp with a mage's hand, lowered his head again, and carefully observed the heart in front of him. With pericardial tamponade like this, there is definitely a heart rupture. The difference lies in how big, how deep, and how many holes have been broken. What is the anatomical structure of an orc's heart? How many atria and ventricles are there? What path does blood circulation take? Are there tricuspid valves, bicuspid valves, etc.? Greet guessed and observed. On the other side, the old priest who looked like a minotaur stood up shivering and came to the table. Why is this wound even bigger? He fought tooth and nail to hang on to his life. The healing spells were almost exhausted, and even the blood sacrifice spell at the bottom of the box was used. I finally recovered, got up and took a look. First, I saw the boss's skeleton. I picked up the skeleton and then looked forward. What's going on? The whole chest was cut open. It was just a small opening. Do not talk. Greet stared at the heart without raising her head. That's the trouble without a professional operating room. Patients' family members, non-professionals, and irrelevant people come and go, and they have to open their mouths to ask questions. Just ask questions, don't spit. Infection, infection. However, Gretel couldn't help but chase people away. The heart that he had saved with his bare hands was now pumping out blood at a rate of 80 or 90 beats per minute. Pop, pop again. See clearly. The location of the breach is in the right atrium. I just don't know how deep it is, whether there is any other damage to the separation between the rooms. If it were in the previous life, Gretel would have used a professional probe to explore, but now he can only make do with the simple things. Mage trick. A thin stick appeared in his hand. It's simple and rough, but it's better than being made out of thin air and not contaminated by dust, that is, it doesn't have any bacteria. Gretel held his breath, holding the newly made probe, and stretched it towards the hole in his heart. 0.5 cm. 1 cm. 1.5 cm. While stretching, visually measure the size of the heart, observe the location and number of surrounding blood vessels, and estimate the general structure of the heart. Very good, there should be no penetration inside, just so directly. Wait, there's no needle and thread. Get healing. Gretel's palm glowed white. Treat minor injuries, minor injuries, minor injuries. Invalid. Every time it seems to grow a little, the myocardium contracts and relaxes, and then tears open again in an instant. Damn it, is this going to challenge the difficult movements of cardiothoracic surgery, with the heart beating continuously and continuous suturing? Gretel secretly grinned at his teeth. He grasped the beating frequency of his heart and threw 2 treat minor injuries in succession, finally sealing the hole in his heart. After observing for a moment, he made sure that the blood was not continuing to spurt out, and then he took out the saline solution to rinse it. Holy water. The old priest raised a bottle with trembling hands. Gretel's eyes lit up. Holy water. Very good. The biggest fear of this kind of major thoracotomy is infection. It is not easy to reach the medicinal power inside the pericardium. It can be washed with holy water, which will save you a lot of worry. Even so, he first flushed it with normal saline to check if there was any active bleeding, and then applied holy water. I can't help it, I'm just used to it. I don't feel at ease if I don't rinse it and take a look. The holy water that the orc priest took out was a little different from what Gretel had seen before. It was not light gold, but bright red in color, like blood. Gretel held it in his hand, almost thinking that the red bottle from the game in his previous life was directly in front of him. But the effect is similar. As soon as the holy water was poured down, the incision on the pericardium began to squirm and heal. Gretel took the opportunity to throw another healing spell. After watching the pericardium heal, he poured the second bottle of holy water into the saline solution. When I went to the battlefield with the field medical team, I once conducted experiments. Rinse the chest, mix holy water and saline 1:1000, and use it to rinse the wound. It has the best anti-infection effect. Also safe. After rinsing, even though Gretel was born in Thunderhorn, he still couldn't control the water flow. Fortunately, he was no longer what he used to be. He no longer had to ask people to lift the injured person to pour water. He just inserted a drainage bottle and waited for the salt water to come out on its own. Seeing that the fluid in the chest was getting less and less, Greet secretly concentrated on mobilizing 4 powerful mage hands to pull the sternum back into place. Just as I was about to close up the vines that diverted the water, there was a sudden loud noise outside. The loudest one was the voice of a drake with a crying voice. Yes. It's right here. That necromancer. Cut people's hearts. Don't be afraid. We are here. Heavy footsteps rumbled in. Gretel didn't even need to raise his head to see the operating table shaking along with the floor, and the injured man's sternum also shaking along with it. Without thinking, he shouted, "Bernard!" With a loud bang, the bone club in the barbarian's hand collided with an unknown weapon. The energy was overwhelming, smoke and dust were flying everywhere, the floor of the room was rattling, and 2 pieces were broken on the spot. My boss is not a necromancer. However, Bernard is only one person. He can stop one person, but he cannot stop a group. Followed by another dull sound, the silver skeleton turned around and raised its arm. The front end of the arm automatically turned into a bone blade, and it got stuck in the air with another weapon, evenly matched. And he said he wasn't a necromancer. With quick eyesight and quick hands, Gretel raised a piece of gauze soaked in saline and quickly covered the injured person's chest. Only then did he take some time to look up, and saw a group of dwarf warriors rushing in from outside. They were all carrying giant axes or giant hammers. The one who was surrounded in the middle had a white light on his hammer head. The blonde orc turned to meet him. Gavin, the dwarf who came with Gretel, raised his voice and helped. "Where's the murder? I'm saving people. Not the necromancer. It's a messenger from the Magic Council who cured my grandfather." The voices of the orcs and dwarves were getting louder than the other. The silver skeleton retreated, Bernard put away the bones and broke the stick, and Greet quickly lowered his head, taking this opportunity to seize the opportunity to close his chest. Powerful mage's hand. Traction the sternum. Match the bones. Twist the tightrope. No, throw the cure. Treat minor injuries. Treat minor injuries. Treat minor injuries. Find and repair small blood vessels and nerves. Heal your muscles. Suture layer by layer. Ah no, treat the chest wall layer by layer. Therapeutics are on the rise. After he had finished the treatment and saw that only the skin was left to be sutured, the injured groaned in pain and raised his head. He hooked his neck and saw a bloody patch on his chest. He felt a sharp pain, his vision went dark, and he passed out again. But this already gave Gretel enough confidence. He raised his voice. "Hey, over there. The injured just woke up." The blonde orc immediately turned around and sprinted towards him. When he lowered his head, he saw that the injured man's chest had been closed, and he was immediately stunned on the spot. There was a cacophony of footsteps behind them, and the dwarves all rushed over. The crowds of people were jumping desperately to look at the operating table. Alive. People live. Really alive. A knife in the heart can still save. The roof of the house was sprayed with blood and he was saved. A miracle doctor. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. There are so few monthly tickets and recommended tickets today. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 365. It must be said that the orcs are really wealthy when they are wealthy. After confirming that his family had survived, the blonde orc grabbed the gold bracelet studded with gems and was about to stuff it into Greet's hand on the spot. Seeing Greet take a step back and waving his hands, he took off his forehead ornaments, neck ornaments, and belt. Golden and heavy, a golden hill was piled on the operating table. Gretel, big dog owner. He still shook his head. To be honest, he is really not interested in gold or anything like that. If possible, let him have a physical examination of these orcs and make a record. This is his first time seeing an orc. Gretel thought about what to say. The blonde orc had touched the bone ring on his hand, and the operating table was shining brightly, with a pile of gems instantly appearing on it. Ruby, sapphire, emerald, crystal agate, lapis lazuli. If he were an orthodox mage, he would already be ecstatic at this moment. Most of these gems, not to mention their value, are precious spellcasting materials. Used to cut, inlay, store spells, and make a bunch of magic props casually. Gretel was still not interested. His eyes casually glanced at the pile of gems, then turned indifferently to the door. The blonde orc shrugged and continued to take things out of the bone ring. Seeing all kinds of bone fragments, sharp teeth, dried fruit petals, and strange things piled up on half the table, Gretel glanced at it, suddenly rushed to the operating table, and grabbed a small gray ball. Where did this come from? How many are there? It was rare for Gretel to be interested in something, so the blonde orc paid great attention to it and frowned in thought. After thinking about it for a long time, he couldn't remember it at all. He reached out and took it from Gretel's hand and squeezed it. The little gray ball was actually a little elastic and he squeezed it a little flat. The orc squeezed it again, and a cold light suddenly appeared on his fingertips, cutting the ball in half, revealing the gray solid interior. That's right, Gretel became even more excited. This is what I want. How many? I want as much as I want. I'll pay for it. I don't know which caravan brought the goods here. The blonde orc raised his head and thought for a while. I don't know where to sell it. Hey, you can look for it and take out everything you have on hand. The orc started rummaging around. And this pile of gold and gems was plainly placed on the operating table. Gretel didn't look at it, and neither did the blonde orc. However, the dwarf guards were very curious, and even if there was blood all over the floor, they couldn't stop them from coming forward to explore. Hey, I've seen this thing before. The leading guard suddenly shouted. It's right in the market. There's a very small shop. In the corner. I've seen such a thing. A group of people walked out in great force. The further we walked, the more remote it became, and the further we walked, the more people there were. People kept pushing over to poke their heads in, pointing and pointing. Is this guy? Alive. Actually alive. You actually walked out on your own. Just now a knife was stuck in his heart. It is said that, the entire chest was cut open just now, blood spurted onto the roof. Which God healed, the human in the middle. Doesn't it look like it? I don't even look like it, but he is the only human being. Gretel tried not to listen to the whispers. He followed the dwarves around, going further and further away, and finally came to a small shop. Two children were squatting at the door, throwing small gray balls of similar appearance on the ground, throwing and bouncing. Gretel stared at the ball with bright eyes. The blonde orc looked him over, called out the shopkeeper, and waved his hand proudly. I bought all these things. Wow! Miraculous Dr. Gretel suddenly discovered that his popularity had been increased. Thanks to the orc who ran wildly in the market and shouted for help, attracting the dwarf guards, at least half of the people in the market heard that there was a necromancer who cut open the chest and cut the heart. And when the treatment was over and the injured person was awakened and walked out with all his hair and tail intact, the legend became that there was a miracle doctor who could cut open the chest and cut the heart and still save the person. By the time Gretel walked out of the market and returned to the trade group, the dwarves who came here were looking for the miraculous doctor who could revive the dead. Gretel. I didn't, don't talk nonsense. Mr. Miracle Doctor, look at me. I just can't use this arm. Mr. Miracle Doctor, my baby has been crying and crying at night. Mr. Miracle Doctor, my father's cough is getting worse and worse, he always has trouble breathing at night. Cough, 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 cough. Gretel looked at the queue that was about to arrive at the entrance of the Mithril district from the entrance of the trade group station with mixed emotions. The other spellcasters who came and went and passed by the trade group station also had mixed emotions. The trade group is based in the Mithril district, the smallest and most exquisite area of the Dwarf King City, also called the Secret Magic District. As the name suggests, most of the people living in this area are spellcasters. There are magicians who are rare among dwarves, enchanters who specialize in enchanting equipment, jewelry that cuts and processes gems, and engraves magic in gemstones, as well as various mages, warlocks, priests, and various other people who come to travel and stay here temporarily. Various professionals. The only rare thing is the healer. Dwarf priests participate in daily work and learn the teachings of God the Father from mining, casting and fighting. Therefore, most of them are scattered in the mining areas, foundry areas, and military areas, using their magical skills to help their compatriots. Therefore, the dwarves do not go to the Mithril district except for special tasks. Here in the Mithril district, it is rare to see the spectacular sight of adults crying, children screaming, and sick people lining up in long queues. Creak sound. At the end of the long street, another door opened. 4 priests wearing black robes and white scarves filed out and stood in 2 rows outside the door. Among the 4, another priest in white robe walked out. The holy light of the Lord of Glory shines on the world and drives away all suffering in the world. People who are sick can be cured as long as they chant the holy name of our Lord. He clasped his hands in front of his chest, then stretched out his arms and raised them to the sky. On the left and right sides, 4 black-robed priests bowed their heads and prayed in unison. The light of the Lord shone on them, and their illnesses were far away from them. The lame man straightened his legs, the blind man opened his eyes, the paralytic man stood up, and the leprosy disappeared. All the patients were restored to health. The light rain fell in bits and pieces with them as the center. As I walked around, people who were ailing felt their bodies lighten when they touched Guanjiao. There was a commotion in the crowd. Soon, several dwarves left the team and tentatively walked over there. They are stealing business from you, Gavin. The dwarf who sent Gretel back, poked his waist and whispered. Do you want me to tell everyone to ignore him? Why bother? Gretel smiled and shook his head. They can treat them if they want. It's good that one more person can be treated. There are so many people, and I can't stand it alone. Greet discussed with the magicians for a while, and simply set up a separate room at the door for treatment. Greet sat in the center of the consulting room, with Bernard working as an assistant. As for Gavin, he simply ran to the door and did the work of maintaining order and calling people one by one for greet. If you don't consider that he is a dwarf, and a male dwarf at that, Gavin actually does a pretty good job of calling the nurse. Soon, Master Zimond, who had returned from shopping, also pulled up a table and joined the treatment team with great interest. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival everyone! Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Thanks at Junzuru Owen for the 500 starting coin reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 366. Gretel worked hard for half an afternoon, using up 20% of his mental energy, before announcing that the day's treatment was complete. Thank God, thank Earth, thank the world for its well-known rules. The caster's daily spells are limited, and the caster has to sleep every day to recover his spells. No one will force healers to work overtime, and forcing is useless. So at dinner time, Greet closed the stall and claimed that the treatment was over, so no one complained. And he hurriedly took 2 bites of rice, then took today's harvest and knocked on Archmage Serrano's door. Come in. As soon as Greed pushed the door open, he immediately stepped back and cast a bubble spell on himself. The room was filled with smoke, half grey and half white, and the Tyndall effect of the chandelier was very obvious. How many people were having a meeting here just now, and how many cigarettes were smoked? It's simply unbearable. You have to endure it even if it is unbearable. Greed walked in using the bubble technique. As expected, the room was full of people, filled with smoke, and everyone's face was illuminated like a ghost by the lamp. Archmage Serrano glanced at Gretel and pointed casually. "Sit down, what's the matter?" I'll come back later." Greed looked left and right. This posture obviously meant that the conversation was not going well, which made a group of old men choke up and started smoking. "Doesn't it seem appropriate to talk about his little things now?" "You're all here, sit down and listen," Archmage Serrano ordered casually. In the past few days of communication, he had a good impression of Gretel, and he didn't mind letting this little fourth-level mage join the meeting. With a wave of his hand, a soft wind blew out, pushing Gretel to sit on the edge. As soon as he sat down, a bald magician next to him slapped the table. "Those stinky rocks. They are so stubborn and won't give in at all. Isn't it just ore? The explosives are all given to them, so there is no need to dig them out with pickaxes. Just drag it out, that's it, and sell it at a high price. Drink them to death," another magician also complained. "Every time we exchange materials, we can obviously buy food, but we have to buy wine. We also need to buy spirits. If one person drinks less, he can save 10 kilograms of mine. Can't the mine tunnel be modified? Or use something to make it easier for them to pull it? A magic puppet? You're kidding. That's too expensive. You might as well increase the purchase price." The magicians were all talking. Archmage Serrano suddenly remembered something and turned his head to ask. "Harry, what you said last time dash." He made a push and pull gesture. The magician named Harry shook his head. "That won't work. I tried it for fun, but when I really made it work, the air leaked too much and couldn't be sealed. I tried gum, twine, and raw lacquer, but they either didn't work or were too damaged." "Quick." Greed kept listening with his ears pricked up. When I heard this, my heart suddenly moved. "Sir, what are you talking about?" "You don't know." Harry turned to look at him with a strange expression on his face. "I remember you also used this in your mage tower, and Norward also published a paper." As he raised his hand, the phantom immediately rose up and occupied the entire coffee table. Gretel understood immediately. "He knows this thing. Steam engine. To be precise, it is a reciprocating steam engine. He also built one in the mage tower to generate electricity. It is indeed a good way to use it as power to pull the minecart up from the mine. If it can really be popularized, the dwarves can save most of their labor, and they don't have to complain about too much work, but their income has not increased. But steam engines are not very efficient." As this Master Harry said, most of the steam was lost. The bonding ability of twine and raw paint is really a headache. It almost leaks while working, and needs to be repaired and sealed every 3 days. If you want to seal it well, you can only let the transformation mage personally go into battle and use the shaping ability to directly rub it with your hands. With this method, it is no problem for a magician to make one for fun, but if he wants to put it into industrial production, the cost is simply a joke. Fortunately, this afternoon, he made an unexpected discovery. "Look at this." Greed held out what he just bought in the afternoon. A bunch of small gray balls, big and small, ranging from the size of a fist to the size of a thumb, slightly elastic. All of a sudden, the eyes of the mages gathered over. "Oh, rubber ball. What's wrong? This thing is useless. Just cut from the tree. Before it dries, you can also apply it on cloth or the outside of leather shoes to make raincoats and boots. After it's dried, it's good for nothing except cutting it into small balls like this to amuse children. Sir, would you like to put sulfur together with it? How to try? Heat it? Probably. Poor Greet didn't know anything except the words vulcanization reaction. He was completely at a loss as to what the ratio of rubber to sulfur was, whether heating was needed, to what degree, whether a catalyst was needed, and whether it should be placed in a solvent. He didn't study chemical engineering. Fortunately, everyone present, in addition to Archmage Serrano, also had 2 mages from the School of Change. The 3 people each took a rubber ball, added sulfur, and played with it in different ways. The stars in the void are dotted and rolling. Gray rubber and light yellow sulfur were kneaded into a ball by invisible hands, and flames, lightning, and various energies shuttled back and forth. Some emitted black smoke, some emitted flames, and some scattered into fine sand. Greet looked left and right, sighing secretly. The mage deserves to be the most productive person. He really doesn't have the ability to create chemical reactions by hand. 3 magicians, more than a dozen plans, started at the same time. If one type doesn't work, change to another, if it doesn't work, change to another. The left and right sulfur is a stock material, and the rubber ball was contributed by Gretel, but it can't be wasted. Soon, Master Harry shouted in surprise. Changed, changed. Softened. He summoned the mage's hand and rubbed it back and forth in the force field, kneading the soft rubber. After squinting his eyes for a while, he suddenly tapped the space bag and poured out a steam engine that was half a person tall and a person long. The rubber in his hand changed shape arbitrarily, suddenly flew up, and smeared firmly on the steam engine. Before Gretel could react, there was a gurgling sound, followed by flames rising. The steam engine roars, the water vapor rolls, and work begins. The mages were silent again and again. Everyone can see that this kind of sulfur-added rubber ball has good elasticity, density, and heat resistance, and is very suitable for use as sealing material on steam engines. The only question now is how long it can last. Besides, how much of this material is there? Greet picked up a corner of the space bag and poured it down. Balls, large and small, rolled out one after another, and soon there was a pile of half a square meter on the coffee table. He spread his hands. That's all. I bought them all in that store. It was a coincidence that such a useless thing could be brought to the Dwarf King city. In any case, with the right materials, there is a plan. After 2 days and 2 nights of continuous testing, the magicians have been able to determine. As a sealing material, rubber is much better than the previous raw paint and twine. That'll do. Natural rubber and the like can be imported on a large scale. Take advantage of the fact that no one else knows the use, so hurry up and grab the goods. Shopping. So, when the negotiations resumed, Archmage Serrano slammed the table and refused to give in. It's impossible to lower the price of ore. At worst, we will provide a batch of power to help you drag out the ore. By the way, let's order a batch of machines like this. Steam engines can be imported in large quantities. Just in time to place an order. The craftsmanship of the dwarves is still worthy of trust. Perfect. Happy Mooncake Festival. I don't know what I was thinking at noon, but I actually wrote it as Zongza Festival. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Little Gretel took the magicians on a side road. In fact, rubber cannot withstand the high temperature and pressure of steam engines. Later, it relied on processing accuracy. The sealing gasket was made of copper. Copper is relatively soft and easy to deform. It can be glued when screwed on. I asked my family who works in a power plant the old man, did he use rubber as a gasket, he gave him a good slap. But of course, compared to the silk seals used by what at that time, rubber still tastes good. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 367. The conscience of heaven and earth. If it were not for the financial deficit, the dwarf kingdom would not want to export so much mithril. This thing requires magical smelting. A palm-sized piece of mithril would consume a high-level priest above level 10, as well as 5 or 6 mid-level priests, and a whole day's worth of magic. If mithril is not smelted, these magical arts can be used to treat diseases, injuries, and take care of pregnant women and young children. How many tribesmen can be helped? Even if no one is sick, using it to forge weapons and armor can bring them closer to God the Father, right? If it weren't for the exhaustion of mining a large amount of ore, they wouldn't bargain hard. So as soon as Archmage Serrano proposed the plan, the dwarves quickly agreed to take a look at the samples. The Dwarf King's city was originally located in the heart of the mountain. Not far from the civilian area, there were mines extending in all directions. It's not difficult to find a place to try out a steam engine. Just. Even if the steam engine is available, shouldn't other equipment be customized first? Greed followed him down the mine in confusion. Then, he watched helplessly as a bright light flashed, and Wizard Harry released the steam engine, which fell heavily to the ground. Then, he reached out and pointed at the copper ingots and iron ingots that had been shipped in advance and piled next to him. The metal blocks deformed on the spot, turning into gears, bearings, rockers, and various other parts. Wizard Harry directed the dwarves to pick it up and assemble it on site, and it actually fit perfectly. Even though Greed had seen the boss rub the mercury arc rectifier, he was still fascinated by it now. Until the steam engine pulled the minecart, clang, clang, up the slope, he still couldn't come to his senses. The ability of this transformation magician is too unscientific. The dwarves were already counting. Such a steam engine working at full capacity is equivalent to at least 20 dwarves, carrying ore uphill all day long. Moreover, it can work during the day and at night, which means that it can free 50 or 60 dwarves from the boring life of transporting ore. And it only needs one person to watch over it. The fire is the magma from the ground, and the water is the snow water brought from outside the cave. The manager only needs to clean up and maintain it, and shovel the bottom of the boiler regularly. It's much easier than dragging a heavy minecart up from the underground along the track. Calculated this way, even if the output of mithril mine increases by 20 times, the labor put in by the dwarves will not increase, but will become much easier. This business can be done. The strong big hand of the dwarf elder immediately grasped Wizard Harry and shook it vigorously. This thing is good. Negotiations are progressing smoothly. The dwarves were able to get the same amount of money with less effort than before, and they also received additional orders. The trade group gave the processing dimensions, ordered 20 steam engines from the dwarves, and promised to continue ordering in the future. Be happy and smile. The income from these orders instantly turned into grain, ale, and wine on the purchase list. On the day before the Dwarf King's 400th birthday, they finally reached a preliminary agreement. According to the dwarf elders who presided over the negotiations, this agreement only needs to be approved by the elders and submitted to the king before it can be sealed. The board of elders of the dwarf kingdom is composed of 7 elders who are responsible for different affairs. Based on past experience, the group of elders generally will not interfere too much in agreements reached by the elder in charge of trade, and at most will make minor adjustments to individual clauses, and the king is already 400 years old, so he will not interfere too much. Therefore, this negotiation has been considered a success. Long live! You can go home soon. With such joy, the magicians attended the king's 400th birthday banquet. When sitting at the banquet table, everyone was in high spirits at the happy event. Even if the past 2 tables were guests of the Church of the Lord of Glory, the magicians just turned away and pretended not to see them. Anyway, the scene is lively enough and there are enough things to see without having to stare at annoying people. Greet sat in the dining room, looking left and right, dizzy. He had previously held a free clinic in Mithril district for 7 or 8 days, and had gained enough popularity that half of the dwarves coming and going were nodding and smiling at him. Those who shook hands and patted their shoulders. If Gretel had not equipped himself with mage armor in advance, he would really be unable to bear this enthusiasm. The blonde orc who also attended the banquet as an envoy even brought the canine orc he rescued to specially come over to offer a toast. Greet, no need to. The Dwarf King's birthday banquet was hundreds of blocks ahead of the human banquet in terms of liveliness or noise. 200 to 300 long tables were set up in the cave hall, and at least several thousand people were cheering and drinking. The shouts, circles, and cheers vibrated back and forth under the dome, and the echoes were buzzing, making people's scalps explode with noise. Even this cannot cover up the rough voice of the dwarf bard. The body of the giant black gate, used to create the vast land. His bones made mountains. The skull melted into the blue sky. A dwarf appeared in the bone marrow of his arm. A dwarf grew from the bone marrow of his finger. Especially strong thigh bones. Barbarian brothers grew from the bone marrow. Dwarves, humans, orcs, and barbarians, all gathered together under the dome. Gretel looked at the plate in front of him helplessly and had no appetite for the wooden wine glass that was bigger than his head. The food is sumptuous, including steaming haggis pie, beer roasted pork ribs, smoked venison, and blood sausages of 3 different colors. However, along the way, I have long been tired of it. How can I break it? He wants to eat vegetables, he misses fruits. Why didn't he bring hundreds more canned fruits before coming out this time? No, why didn't he develop canned fruits when he was in the Mage Tower? Bernard, I leave it to you. Greet pushed the dinner plate aside. The bard sang the 3rd song, and the cheers suddenly became louder. 7 elders filed in, followed by the dwarf king with a white beard and white hair, whose beard almost reached the ground. As he walked, he waved around and greeted the guests with a smile. Gretel tried his best to stretch his head and look. A 400-year-old dwarf is almost equivalent to a human centenarian. This king has sagging skin, sparse hair, and many age spots on his face. However, he still walked steadily through the passage. When he stepped on the steps, he did not need anyone to support him step by step. It was obvious that he was also a strong warrior in his youth. The king sat high on the throne, above Gretel's head, ensuring that all the guests could see it. Then, he picked up a golden helmet from the right side of the throne, filled it with wine, and raised it above his head. Thank you all guests for coming to my birthday banquet. After today, the new king selection competition will begin, and I will pass the throne to the new king according to tradition. Gretel, what? So is our agreement still in effect? Can I sign a contract tomorrow? Thanks to at Old Time and Space Mengwe Observer for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 368. Gretel quickly turned his head and looked at Archmage Serrano. The Archmage sat at the top of the long table, close to the throne, and was observing the Dwarf King attentively. After a while, he lowered his head and tapped the wine glass gently. We may have to stay a little longer. The Archmage's voice was thin and gentle. Greet lowered his head depressedly. It's over, we can't go back right away. If he stays for a while longer, he will be deficient in vitamins. Greet silently took out a small bottle and poured a multivitamin into his bowl, or rather, the failed product when making vitamin C, comprehensive fruit and vegetable powder. Pour half a bowl, scoop out some soup, stir it, and drink it in one go. Fortunately he was prepared. Fortunately, whatever he makes, he always saves some of it. If he only stored sodium ascorbate and no fruit and vegetable powder, he would definitely be deficient in vitamin A, vitamin B, and vitamin D. By the way, how long will we stay? Doesn't the dwarf kingdom pass from king to prince? SHH. Wizard Harry raised a finger to his lips. Gretel quickly shut up and listened to Master Harry's message. The dwarf kingdom is not like this. Unlike humans, the inheritance system of the dwarf kingdom is not a natural succession of father to son. In fact, every time the throne changes, the 7 tribes in the kingdom will send out candidates. In full view of the public, complete a series of projects and determine the winner according to tribal traditions. Wait, which 7 tribes? Greet interrupted quietly. Master Harry cast a reproachful look. How did you memorize the information when you came here? Gretel winced. Can he say that he read it in a hurry and focused mainly on the dwarf's physical condition and past medical records? 7 major tribes, 3 large and 4 small. The largest one is the Firehammer tribe living in the royal court, which is the tribe of the contemporary dwarf king. Wizard Harry lowered his voice and nodded his chin in the direction of the throne. Look, the first candidate has stepped forward. Standing on the edge of the long table closest to the throne, a dwarf with a reddish-brown beard stood up and climbed the steps in 2 or 3 steps. He turned his back to the king, stood on the 2 steps below the throne, and raised his hands to the crowd. Cheers instantly broke out. Rosger! Rosger! Hammer of Glory! Oh, this is the 3rd son of the contemporary king. He is 163 years old this year. Wizard Harry whispered to Gretel. I once led my tribe to open up the Heavdan mine, found the best mithril vein in recent years, and killed the Balrog deep in the mine. You see, there is a smooth patch on his cheek. He has no beard. He is just burned by the flames. Traces of demonic burns. 163 years old. Hearing this age made Greet grin. He had traveled through time, and the age of this body was less than half of this age. Even in terms of human age, this Hammer of Glory is equivalent to a human being in his early 40s, in his prime. As the leader of the kingdom, is he just the right age, or is he still a little younger? A second candidate also came forward. When he climbed the steps, the cheers in the hall were even louder than the dwarf prince. Ingvar! Ingvar! Axe of the army! Oh, this is the son of the elder of the Steel Hammer tribe, the deputy leader of the Rock Sheep Knights in the Dwarf King city. Master Harry obviously did a good job in his homework and continued to chatter. When he was 42 years old, he killed the flying dragon alone. At the age of 45, he climbed to the top of Hela Peak and sacrificed the battle axe he forged to the gods. It is said that he received the blessing of the dwarf god. At this point, the 3rd candidate also stood up. The cheers received by this one were much smaller, and Wizard Harry shrugged. Max of the Silverbeard tribe. This tribe is the one most closely associated with mysterious powers and has the highest proportion of spellcasters among the dwarves. The disadvantage is that there are few people. There are only 3 tribes living in the royal court. A ruling clan, a fighting clan, and a caster clan. Greet calculated in his mind. This is a good match. The triangular power structure is the most stable. As for the king selection this time, it will probably be decided between the first 2, and the caster tribe will probably accompany them. After that, 4 candidates stood up one after another. The cheers in the hall became smaller and smaller. It was obvious that the 4 dwarves were from other tribes and were not well known in the local area. There is only one exception to this. When Kai from the Black Rock tribe stood on the steps, the cheers that rang out in the hall almost surpassed those of the Dwarf King's son. Black Rock tribe. They are adventurers among the dwarves. They travel in the mountains, hills, and wastelands all year round, looking for various mineral veins. Wizard Harry's eyes flashed. I have heard of Kai's name before. He is the most famous prospector in recent years. It is said that his most famous nickname is God's Tongue. Puff. Gretel laughed. What strange place have you thought of? Master Harry looked at him with surprised eyes. People have this nickname because they claim that as long as they taste the soil, they can tell what kind of mine it is and what its grade is. This is a magical prospecting skill that no one else can learn. And don't have to worry about getting a stomach full of parasites. Gretel complained silently. The 7 candidates greeted the crowd one by one, and then the bards played majestic music again. This time, all the dwarves in the hall, and even many barbarians, clapped their hands and joined in the chorus. Wizard Harry clapped his hands and translated for Gretel in a low voice. It's a good thing that this is the case, otherwise Gretel would not be able to identify a sentence or a half of the lyrics in the chorus no matter how many times he brushes language proficiency back and forth. The golden sunshine illuminates the mountains. The great dwarf king sets out on his journey. He took with him 6 close companions. That is the wise king of the 6 tribes in later generations. Brave Bear carries his battle axe. The sharp axe blade scares ghosts and gods. Wise Porika took hold of the staff. The light on the head of the staff breaks through the dense forest. Willow took out the iron bones of the Black Gate, the treasures of the earth, the precious ores. Hitan smelted it in the furnace, and the magma swallowed up the stone and spit out pure gold. The mighty Fatla raised up his strength and forged it with thousands of blows. The Goths in the wilderness hunted magical beasts and tempered Hanfeng with their blood and beast souls. They tamed blue sheep and climbed high mountains on their backs. On the highest mountain top, on the snowy peak, offer your unparalleled battle axe to the gods. God the Most High Father sends down joy. He said, whoever holds this axe will be invincible. The dwarf king holds a battle axe to fight against the dragon. The first axe fell and split the dragon's head. The second axe fell and shattered the remaining scales. The third axe fell and cleared away the poisonous mist. The caves of the dwarves will always be at peace. The singing gradually stopped. The dwarf king stood up again, leaning on the heavy golden scepter. According to the tradition of the kingdom, each candidate will bring his own team, up to 7 people. The caster must not be at level 5 or higher, and set off in 3 days. Within a month, they will walk the path of the sages and personally mine, smelt, cast, forge weapons, tame mounts, and ride goats to the top. Before the arrival of the next full moon night, they need to sacrifice their newly crafted weapons to God the Father at the top of the mountain. Finally, if there is more than one candidate who has accomplished all this, the candidates will hold the sacrificed weapons and fight against each other in front of the royal court, the elders, and everyone. The winner will become the new king of all dwarves. Cheers broke out. The dwarves raised their hands in the air, howled and jumped up and down without emotion. Greet, so we have to stay here for another month. But I'm exhausted. Why have I gone crazy to write dwarf poetry? It even rhymes. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 369. Gretel's whole body was in bad shape. Not that I have to stay for another month. There are ways to overcome it, including food and shelter. The main thing is that the Dwarf Kingdom's method of choosing a king completely shocked him. He quietly asked Master Harry, "Do you really want to start with mining? What should I do if I don't know how?" Mining, mineral processing, smelting, casting, taming mounts, survival in the wild, combat, these skill trees are so different. Are you sure one person can order so many skills? And, why would a king need these skills? In the entire process, it seems that only the skill of leading a small team of 7 people has anything to do with ruling a kingdom. Is the king chosen in this way really reliable? Are you sure there won't be any problems? Also, is it really okay for us, the Magic Council, to maintain friendly relations with the dwarf kingdom that chooses its king in this way? How could it not be? Master Harry rolled his eyes at him. Mining and smelting are something that every dwarf must learn from childhood, and the prince is no exception. Only the best miners can learn to forge iron, and only those who can forge their own weapons can become warriors. Can't you learn? 40 years old, start learning and wait until you reach adulthood at the age of 80. Is there anything you can't learn? Okay, okay. There is a difference between long-lived and short-lived species. You have a long lifespan and you are willful, okay. Gretel calmed down silently. If you think about it again, this way of selecting a king can at least ensure that a down-to-earth ruler is selected. From the people, to the people, is it actually quite good? Moreover, every nation has its own characteristics, so we should not interfere with each other. Just like the queen of the Northern Wei dynasty, if she wanted to be canonized, she had to cast a gold figure herself. This is also, just be happy with it. He lowered his head and calmly picked up the rice. After the banquet, the old king summoned the trade group and expressed his condolences with a smile, saying that everyone had worked really hard before. Then, the conversation changed. However, such an important agreement should not be decided by my old man. Can you please wait another month for the new king to be elected and let him talk to you? Great. I knew it. He returned to the trade mission station and plunged into research again. After rescuing the orc earlier, Gretel exchanged their bloodline magic with the old orc priest, and gained a lot of inspiration. These days, research on the magic of blood oxygen monitoring is getting better and better. He has conducted whole lung lavage experiments on rabbits, goats, elk, wild boars, and various other animals, with a success rate of over 90%. It's just one key point away from completion. As long as it is completed, clinical trials can be conducted. If we leave immediately, where will we find so many patients? Gretel stayed calm and treated the dwarves during the day, accumulating cases and physiological data, building relationships and developing reserve patients, and at night, he used the rewards sent by the patients to conduct animal experiments. After the experiments and dissections were completed, they were sent to the kitchen, and the entire trade group had a meal the next day. Beautiful. If there were no accidents, he would not get tired of living like this for another month. Unfortunately, the accident came too quickly, like a tornado. On the third night, the night when the king's selection group was about to set off, a sudden knock on the door broke the tranquility of the trade group. In the trade group, several high-level mages hurried past. In about an hour, everyone left and returned, and then Archmage Serrano knocked on Greet's door himself. What's the matter? Greet's hand trembled. With this distraction, the vines on the fingertips retracted in a whoosh. Greet screamed and rushed towards the console. My dear! My dear! Half of the lungs have just been filled with water. Pulling out this vine is like removing the ventilator, and the blood oxygen will drop sharply. He casually fired a shot of distinguished bloodline change, and sure enough, the feedback results were horrific. Gretel was in a hurry, patting his back, using negative pressure drainage, and using powerful mage's hands to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. After rescuing it for a long time, he finally rescued the deer. Throw out distinguished bloodline change again. A bright red light rose up, full and pure, indicating that the blood oxygen saturation had returned to full. A group of mages rushed into the room and saw this chaotic scene. Everyone looked at each other, no one said anything, and waited patiently for him to finish his work. Just as Gretel breathed a sigh of relief, the dwarf Gavin, who was brought in by the mages, immediately pounced on him. Gretel, you must help. It's all up to you. What's wrong? Greet's heart trembled. He grabbed Gavin with his backhand and said, Is Master Talbot in trouble? Take me there immediately. No. No, Gavin shook his head vigorously. It's not Grandpa, it's Brother Gizi, no, it's Brother Rothaga. You must help Brother Rothaga. Gretel was stunned. Rothaga, he just heard this name a few days ago, and because of its special name, he was quite impressed, the third son of the Dwarf King, and the #1 candidate participating in the King selection competition this time. He suddenly looked at Archmage Serrano. The Archmage twirled his beard and nodded slightly. That's right, it's the prince's partner in the competition, Pastor Gizi. This afternoon, he went to the furnace for forging work and prayed for God's grace. Unexpectedly, an accident occurred during the forging process. A pot of molten steel overturned. Is it important? Do you need my help? Greet stood up immediately. Archmage Serrano waved his hand. The person is fine. Although he was rescued, the burn area was too large and the wear and tear was severe. I'm afraid I won't be able to participate in this King selection competition. Oh, I'm rescued, that's good. Although it seems a bit too much to say that you are going to work in the big furnace when you are about to set off, but this seems to be the case for the dwarves. Mining and casting are ways for them to get closer to God. What is the purpose of daily prayer? Gretel cursed and felt relieved. He looked at Archmage Serrano and said nothing, waiting for him to continue. The person was rescued, so what? You come to me late at night, you don't know. Do you want me to join the King selection team? Gretel, you must help Brother Rothergot, Gavin repeated anxiously. We can only rely on you. Yeah, it's true. But why me? In the huge dwarf royal city and the huge Firehammer tribe, can't a 4th level priest find anyone else? Why do you want to find me, an outsider? And Archmage Serrano also agreed. Gretel looked at the Archmage. Before he could ask, Archmage Serrano spoke with a heavy face as if he had a clear understanding. We inspected the founding site of Priest Geth and found traces of man-made manipulation. Moreover, the mana residue at the site is highly similar to the holy power of the Lord of Radiance. Then, go beat them up. Greet swallowed the words as soon as they came to her mouth. Sure enough, Archmage Serrano shook his head. The traces are too shallow and can only be identified using magic. Moreover, the election of the king is imminent, so it is not appropriate to cause another incident. As for the other priests, the corners of his mouth turned down. Today during the day, the young priests of the Firehammer tribe held a banquet to honor Pastor Geth. As a result, bad wine was used at the banquet, and most of the priests were knocked down. Fine. Methanol poisoning. Delirium, confusion, coma, pain in both eyes, decreased vision, blindness. Greet can recite a long list without reviewing textbooks. The brewing technology in this world is at the level of a family workshop. The fermentation was slightly inappropriate, and the methanol exceeded the standard every minute. Let me show you. Gretel clearly remembered that in his previous life, many medical VS had repeatedly popularized science. Let everyone not drink wine from workshops, don't drink homebrew wine, don't drink loose wine. What's more, dwarves are famous for their love of drinking. Drink it every day, every month, every year. If there is a celebration, I will drink it. If there is no celebration, I will find a reason to drink. When I drank until I was in a daze, a barrel of wine with too high methanol content was brought to me. It is estimated that no one can tell the difference. So this is what they did too? He asked in a low voice. Archmage Serrano shook his head solemnly. The evidence is insufficient, so it's hard to say yet. However, one of the outstanding young priests of the Firehammer tribe was basically knocked down, and another. Furthermore, 2 consecutive accidents showed heavy traces of human intervention. From Archmage Serrano's point of view, even to balance the intervention of the Holy See, the magicians must take action. Greet, you must help with this. Gavin anxiously grabbed Greet's right hand and pulled hard, almost knocking him over. You are a 4th level priest, and you are also a 4th level magician. You are much better than a simple priest. And now we are short of time. We can't find anyone anymore. It's not like looking for other tribes. But I'm human. Greet said blankly. Can humans also participate in the Dwarf King choosing battle? Will it not disqualify you? It's okay, we don't care about this. Gavin waved his hand carelessly. The Ironbone tribe often brings barbarians into the field, and the Wild Hammer tribe, the tribe that lives in the Far East. Every time there are orcs in the King selection team, no one says anything. Anyway, from mining to blacksmithing, the candidates, everyone has to do it themselves, and everyone can see how well they do the work and whether they are lazy. If you don't do it well, you won't be able to convince the public. Mining. Blacksmithing. Gretel's eyes darkened. I don't know how to mine. I don't know how to blacksmith, I don't know how to tame a goat. When we set out, Archmage Carlyle warned me not to climb mountains or anything like that. Is it just a delay for an industrious mage like me to join the team? The caster just needs to do the job of the caster. Archmage Serrano waved his hand. I've talked to them, and they all agree. You do a good job of treatment, and if you have the chance, help them with magic. That's enough. Don't worry, you don't have to mine or swing a hammer. Of course, the price is that Bernard has to dig a mine for 2 people and wield a hammer for 2 people. Archmage Serrano has reached an agreement with the dwarves on this point. Of course, Bernard can also help Gretel tame the goats, accompany Gretel on mountain climbs, and protect his safety. What? Is there a dragon on the top of the mountain? The dragon is in the northern section of the Black Gate Mountains, which is still 700 to 800 kilometers away from Wangting. You don't have to worry about encountering it just by climbing the mountain. I just got the news. With a creak, the wooden door of the room was pushed open, and Master Zaman stepped in with a serious face. The candidate from the Black Rock tribe has a priest from the Lord of Glory in his king selection team. 3,000 words. 3,000 more words in the afternoon and I will be able to complete the additional updates. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 370. Gretel was thrust into the king selecting team with his eyes darkened. Can't mine, can't smelt, can't cast. The only thing he knows is healing and magic. If his teammates are not injured, he is actually of little use. In order to ensure his safety, Bernard must occupy an additional hole. Due to all this, Gretel always felt that he would not be too popular in the king selection team. Unexpectedly, as soon as he and Bernard stepped into the hall, warm applause came from all around. Mr. Nordmark, the candidate of the Fire Hammer tribe, the 3rd prince of the Dwarf King, Rotherga, walked over first. His smile was bright and sunny. Although his height only reached Greet's chest, the strength he held his right hand while shaking it up and down was not light at all. Thank you for your help in the next month. Greet shook it back hard. His Royal Highness's hand was very strong, but he restrained his strength so as not to hurt his hand. After shaking it twice, he turned to Bernard again. Welcome. Greet resisted and did not turn his head. The scene in front of me was truly horrific. The dwarf prince was only slightly more than half the size of a barbarian. When 2 people shake hands, Rotherga has to stretch his arms upward, and Bernard has to bend down. Here they shook hands, and over there Gavin had already pulled Gretel and walked forward happily. While walking, introduced to him. This is Philae, the strongest shield warrior in the Royal City Guards. He can lift the tower shield with one hand. Philae grinned. His face is covered with beard, and even when he speaks, his mouth is buried in the beard, and it is almost impossible to see clearly. Mr. Master, thank you for your hard work. I heard what Gavin said about what you have done. You are his friend and a friend of all of us. This is Hannah, the son of Master Floor. The best warriors in the royal city are clamoring for the weapons he forged. Hannah craned her neck and listened to them. After listening for a while, he straightened his face and stretched out his hand to Gretel. A pair of eyes may have been staring at the fire for a long time, and they were always slightly squinted, and it was no exception when looking at Greet. Gretel quickly stretched out his hand to hold his hand, and when he spoke, he also spoke in an especially loud voice. Gavin looked at him with a smile and pulled him to the next person. This is Jin Na, she is, my fiancée. Fiancée. Gretel was startled and looked at Gavin with new eyes. How old are you, buddy? Master Tarbot is 352 years old. You are his grandson, so you should be over 100 years old. Well, immortal seed, willful. Jin Na immediately received his gaze. The female dwarf took a step forward and raised her head high. What, you're surprised? I just didn't know he actually had a fiancée. Gretel smiled and stretched out his hand. Jin Na shook his hand hard, her strength no less than that of the previous ones. Even though I'm a woman, if I want to design machinery and make some novel things, none of them can do it for me. Mr. Master, I've seen that steam engine, it's very interesting. Can I ask you for advice when you have time? Women in the Dwarf Kingdom spend most of their daily life spinning, cooking, making furniture, and raising livestock. Jin Na refused to admit defeat and insisted on learning mining and blacksmithing like her brothers. She is not as strong as a man, but she loves to think and has a talent for mechanics. It was also because of this ability that Prince Rosga brought him in when he organized the team. Of course, Gretel held her hand and shook it vigorously. But I'm not mechanical, I just have some ideas. Don't laugh at me then. The 7 people stayed together in Wangting that night, and set out from Wangting together early the next morning. The King Selection Ceremony is a grand event that occurs once every few hundred years in the Dwarf Kingdom. 7 teams lined up in a square formation at the entrance of the palace. The 7 candidates stepped forward one after another. This time, it was not Prince Rothaga who took the lead, but the candidate who stood out last at yesterday's banquet was the first to step forward. He took out a silver lot from the gold box in the king's hand, looked at it, held it in his hand and stepped back. The 7 candidates drew lots in turn, and in the hands of Prince Rosga, only the last one was left. Gretel was standing in the second to last row and had no idea what they were smoking. He only saw Gavin poking the person in front of him on the lower back. Where? Where? Later. Let's see when we get out. The man in front of him turned to answer. As expected, the team quickly began to move, one team at a time, filing forward. The king and the elders poured the wine themselves and handed it to everyone one by one. Greet looked around in the team, and sure enough he saw barbarians, the blonde orcs he had dealt with, and a priest who looked familiar. Wearing a black robe, with curly brown hair, he held the holy symbol on his chest with his eyes lowered. It was as if he was just immersed in a conversation with God. If he remembered correctly, he had met this priest before when he was treating the little boy with Putzjäger's syndrome in the hotel. Gretel took the wine bowl from the old king. Fortunately, the bowl is not big and the alcohol content is not high, not much better than fermented rice. He drank it in one sip, followed the team, and moved straight forward. The cheers around him were already rising in waves. From the gate of the palace, the streets were deserted. A straight avenue leads to the central melting pot, and then goes around the melting pot. The roadside was lined with people. Not only were the candidates calling out their names, but outsiders like Greet were also greeted constantly. Mr. Pastor, my son's fever broke last night. Mr. Pastor, my father did as you asked and he is much better these days. Mr. Pastor. After finally walking this way, when they came out of the cave and saw the light of day, A few dwarves gathered around them. Gavin was the first to come forward. Where? Which mine are we going to? Greet stood aside blankly. On the other hand, Prince Rosga smiled and explained to him. 7 teams, each digging their own mines, cannot all be crowded together. Each time, the ministers and elders inspect together and select 7 similar mines, and the candidates draw lots one by one. The Dwarf King's Court was originally located on a mineral vein, and there were countless mines of various sizes within dozens of miles around. The types and grades of ore in the mines extracted in this way are all very different. As for how much ore can be dug out after entering the mine, and whether the mine is good or not, it depends on each team. After leaving the royal court, the 7 teams exploded like fireworks, each going to their respective destinations. The sign that Prince Rosga got said that the Aran Bay mine requires climbing 2 hills from the royal palace. The group arrived at their destination and were still settling in. Prince Rosga rolled up his sleeves and dived into the mine. Let him go in alone. Gretel's eyes followed his back, dumbfounded. Gavin spreads his hands. It's okay, this guy is the best at mineral processing. Let him decide which area to dig first, and then we go in and start work. This is the fastest. Well, I don't quite understand the skill points of your dwarves. Gretel felt relieved and silently used his mage's hands to sort out the wood, light a fire and boil water, and prepare to take a bath. The water in the cauldron had just boiled, and before it was poured into the bucket, Gavin suddenly jumped in with an angry look on his face. Asshole! What? Gretel and Bernard stopped together. Gavin glanced at the room and immediately twitched the corners of his mouth. The bones of a dwarf's body are made of iron. As long as they are not seriously ill, anyone who takes a bath will carry a bucket of cold water and pour it directly on their head. Only Gretel not only had to take a hot bath, but there were buckets floating around the room and invisible servants carrying water for him. What exactly is cleansing used for? He looked away from the bucket. There were noisy footsteps, and several other dwarves followed. Gavin said angrily. That guy from the Black Rock tribe brought a digger to their team. This is simply cheating. Greet was startled. He had seen digger bugs in the council's atlas. Adult bugs are 2 feet in diameter and can be 4 to 5 meters long. They live on ore. It eats and poops in the mine, and can eat as much ore as its body weight in 10 days. The hard shell formed on its body is the metal extracted from these ores by the instinct of the demonic insects. You can cast it directly by knocking it off, no need to bother to smelt it. The only problem is that this kind of demonic insect is quite rare and not easy to tame. Only the caster can control it. That Kai of the Black Rock tribe could work with diggers. Without even thinking about it, Greet felt that it must be the conspiracy of the Lord of Glory Church. Is the news correct? He asked. Fila, Hannah, Jana, and others also asked confusedly. How big is that digger? Is it an adult insect? How long does it take for a shell to form? The news must be true, Gavin patted his chest. You don't know me yet. I have brothers everywhere. It's a letter from the brothers in the mine over there. The patrol just brought it. I don't know how old the bug is. They only released it after they entered the depths of the mine. My brother just took a look at it from a distance. If you want to know the details, you have to wait until tomorrow. This is still a little communicator. Gretel was impressed. Everyone was talking about it, and Hannah frowned and said, if the worms are big enough and have enough shells, they can wear a full set of armor. In that case, the advantage will be huge. Don't we wear a full set of armor? Gretel couldn't help but be surprised when he heard this for the first time. The dwarves turned to him. It's very difficult to fight with a full set of armor. There's too much ore to dig out. We don't have enough time to dig it out. Even if we can dig out so much ore and transport it back to refine the molten iron, we still have to hammer it out. Gretel lowered his head and thought. According to the rules of the King Selection Battle, candidates can only fight with newly forged equipment. There is a huge difference between just holding a weapon and wearing a full set of armor. If the combat levels of both sides are similar, there is almost no chance of a fight. I found a good mine. Prince Rozga suddenly walked in, with bright eyes and sweat on his forehead. Seeing that everyone looked unhappy, he stopped and lowered his voice. "What's wrong?" The dwarves answered each other word by word. Prince Rozga listened silently, smiled, and patted Gavin on the shoulder. "It doesn't matter. What others do is their business, we just have to do our best. Since we need a lot of ore, let's start digging from now on." "Good." The dwarves stood up one after another, including the female dwarf Jana. Only Gretel sat still, watching them get the tools one by one, and raised a hand. I said, "Do you want to try mining methods other than iron pickaxes?" 3,000 words. Finished with more updates. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of